You've never been ignored. You just didn't know how to interpret silence. While you believe that you're not the type of man who attracts attention, the environment around you screams signals that you've never learned to decipher. It's not a lack of beauty. It's not a lack of charisma. It's a lack of perception. Casanova wasn't the most handsome or the strongest, but he was the most attentive, and that made him irresistible. Do you think a woman needs to say she's interested? Does she need an explicit invitation, a lingering glance, verbal validation? Let me tell you the truth. Most women who want you will never have the courage to say so openly. They create camouflaged approaches, masked gestures, and if you don't understand this language, you spend your life thinking you're invisible. But you were never invisible. You were just blind to the unspoken codes. Casanova said, "A woman wants to be won over by someone who reads her before listening to her. And this reading is not in the dialogue. It is in the subtle movements, in the glances that are quickly averted, in the presences that orbit you in silence." Have you ever wondered how many opportunities you have missed simply because you were waiting for explicit confirmation that would never come? The problem is not your lack of value. The problem is that you were taught to wait for the wrong validation. Hollywood has programmed you to wait for obvious scenes, glances that last for minutes, rehearsed declarations, direct invitations. But reality doesn't work like that. True attraction is whispered, and the men who master this silent reading master the game without having to move a piece. Do you believe that the most attractive man is the one who conquers? Casanova would tell you no. The most attractive man is the one who creates the field where conquest becomes inevitable. And here's the most overlooked detail. The men who are most attractive are, ironically, the ones who doubt their own impact the most. They compare themselves to unrealistic archetypes, to unattainable models, and don't realize that their presence already changes the dynamics of any environment. Have you ever noticed how certain conversations pause when you walk in? How people adjust their posture around you? How eyes follow you even when you're not talking? This is not chance. This is resonance. It is the influence you exert without realizing it. Casanova called this nonverbal presence. Your mistake is not being unattractive. Your mistake is measuring your attractiveness by the wrong standards. And starting today, that changes. In this video, you'll discover the hidden signs that reveal you're much more attractive than you think. These aren't explicit compliments or direct invitations. They are details you have been ignoring for years. The way women orbit your space, how they create excuses to be close to you, how they test your perception before taking a chance. What's more, you will understand why truly influential men never compete for attention. They filter. They observe who is trying to gain space in their orbit, not the other way around. Get ready. Because by the end of this video, you will not only understand how women really perceive you, you will understand how to transform that perception into presence. And more than that, you will learn to stop being the man who waits for signs and become the man who deciphers them before everyone else. From now on, the question is not, am I attractive? The question is, how long will you continue to ignore the signs that have always been in front of you? You live thinking that you are not a man of impact. You believe that you need a perfect face or a fortune to be noticed. But Giacomo Casanova, the greatest seducer in history, was never just about beauty. He knew something that men today have forgotten: the power of presence. And that presence comes from keen perception, not from a face. Casanova said, "A woman falls in love with the man who looks at her as no one else has ever dared." But how do you look? How do you see beyond the obvious? Here's the brutal truth. You are more attractive than you think, but you are measuring your worth by the wrong standards. You wait for clear signs, direct words, open invitations. But true seduction is subtle. Glances that last a second longer, approaches that seem casual, questions that test your reaction. While you wait for explicit confirmation, she is already orbiting you, waiting to be noticed. The mistake isn't that you're invisible, it's that you don't know how to read the invisible game. Women, as Casanova knew, don't throw themselves into anyone's arms. They set the stage to be found. If you don't notice, they don't insist. Not out of disinterest, but out of frustration. It's not a lack of beauty. It's a lack of reading. How many times have you noticed a woman walking by for no reason, adjusting her posture when you enter? These are not random gestures. They are signals. Casanova read them masterfully. He knew that a woman would never say come, but would create the scenario to be discovered by those who know how to see. And here's the difference. The average man needs permission. The irresistible man offers insight. When you start to notice these patterns, the quick glance, the restrained smile, the repeated presence in your field of vision, you understand that attraction is not declared. It is suggested. And those who decipher this language dominate. Interestingly, the most desirable men are those who doubt their own worth. Why? Because they compare themselves to unattainable standards. Casanova was never the most handsome man in the room, but he was always the most attentive. And attention creates a devastating advantage. He knew that female attraction is built on 3 levels: perception, positioning, and reaction. While others waited for clear signals, he created micro-connections. A word said in the right tone, a sustained gaze, a presence that made the surrounding environment irrelevant. Have you ever noticed how certain conversations stop when you speak? How groups adjust their pace without you asking? This is not by chance. It is the halo effect. It is the silent energy of someone who is aligned with their own value. Casanova did not need to dominate a room. He made the room want to dominate him. Another detail: attractive men do not compete for attention. They distribute their focus selectively. They don't beg for looks. They arouse curiosity by showing that they choose where to invest their attention. Casanova called this intentional mystery. Seduction is not about impressing. It's about observing deeply until the other person feels they've never been seen before. When you notice furtive glances, posture adjustments, and disguised approaches, understand that the attraction has already begun. The question is, can you recognize it before she gives up on being noticed? The most attractive men don't talk about their own worth. They reflect it in the way they carry themselves. Casanova never said he was desirable. He made women want to be the only one to discover him. Your impact is not in the words you want to hear, but in the silences you learn to decipher. When you stop seeking explicit confirmation and start reading subtle signals, your social world changes. You stop being a spectator and become the man who dictates the dynamics. You haven't noticed it yet, but you're already being watched. Casanova knew something that few men understand. Seduction does not begin with words, but with territory. He observed how women created social accidents to cross his path. And you? How many times have you ignored these subtle movements? How many times did you think a woman was just passing by, when in fact she was orbiting you? Women are silent strategists. When attracted, they create excuses to be close without seeming obvious. They need to get something where you are. They enter conversations where you lead. They find routes that cross your field of vision. Casanova called this the invisible dance. If you don't notice, you leave the game without knowing you were playing. The cruelest part? The most desirable men are the ones who are least aware of this. They wait for explicit, direct signals, like in the movies. But the real game is indirect, subtle, full of layers. When you don't see it, you underestimate yourself. And when you underestimate yourself, you exclude yourself. Here's the key. A woman only creates orbits around a man she perceives as high value. That doesn't mean wealth or beauty, but perception, presence, and social dominance. When you show her that you're the man who sees her before others do, she knows she's found someone different. Imagine a party. You're talking in a group and you notice repeated glances. Not long, but frequent. She passes by you more times than necessary. When you speak, she adjusts her body in your direction. These aren't random gestures. They're tests. Casanova said that women don't give themselves to the strongest, but to the most attentive. When you respond to these signals with a sustained gaze, a brief smile, or a phrase delivered in just the right tone, the dynamic changes. She realizes that you are the man who knows how to play the game without declaring that you are playing. Another overlooked pattern: silent integration. Attracted women begin to insert themselves into your groups without invitation. They want to be noticed, but they also want to test how you react to their presence. Many men ignore this. waiting for a verbal signal. Casanova knew that the most powerful reaction was strategic indifference, noticing but not giving in right away. A truly attractive man does not compete for attention. He allows it. He observes who seeks his energy, who tries to enter his circle. Casanova was not a hunter. He was the prize that knew how to make himself inaccessible until he was conquered. There is a psychological phenomenon called the halo effect, where positive attributes project other attributes, even without proof. When you carry a strong presence, people automatically assume that you are more intelligent, more interesting. Groups stop to listen to you. People seek your opinion. Casanova used this effect effortlessly, not to impress, but to select. This does not mean being arrogant. The strength of presence comes from the balance between magnetism and discernment. Casanova did not dominate spaces with volume. He dominated with context. He knew when to speak, when to withdraw, when to be the enigma in a noisy room. When you notice women integrating themselves around you, orbiting your space, creating coincidences to be close to you, understand, this is positioning. The difference is in who recognizes the game before it's over. Those who ignore it sabotage themselves. Those who perceive it transform the interaction into a game of choice, not necessity. Casanova didn't seek approval. He was the filter. This filter begins with how you interpret signs of approach, a step in your direction, an adjustment in posture, a veiled smile. Every detail is an opening, a key discreetly handed over. Seduction is not about chasing. It's about being found by the right eyes. Casanova knew that seduction does not begin with words but with territory. He watched how women created social accidents to cross his path. And you? How many times have you thought that a woman was just passing by, when in fact she was orbiting you? Women are silent strategists. When attracted, they create excuses to be close without seeming obvious. They need to get something where you are. They enter conversations where you lead. They pass through your field of vision more often than necessary. Casanova called this the invisible dance. If you don't notice, you leave the game without knowing you were playing. The cruelest part? The most desirable men are the ones who are least aware of this. They wait for clear, direct signals like in the movies. But the real game is indirect, subtle, full of layers. When you don't see it, you underestimate yourself. And when you underestimate yourself, you lose. A woman only orbits a man she perceives as high value. It's not about beauty or wealth, but perception, presence, and social dominance. When you show yourself to be the man who sees what others ignore, she knows she's found someone different. Imagine a party. You're talking in a group and notice frequent glances. Not long, but insistent. She passes by you more than she needs to. She adjusts her body in your direction when you speak. These are not random gestures. They are tests. Casanova said that women do not give themselves to the strongest, but to the most attentive. When you respond to these signals with a sustained gaze, a brief smile, or a phrase delivered in just the right tone, the dynamic changes. She realizes that you are the kind of man who knows how to play the game without having to declare that you are playing. Another overlooked pattern: silent integration. Attracted women begin to insert themselves into your groups without invitation. They want to be noticed, but they also test how you react. Many men ignore this, waiting for a verbal signal. Casanova knew that the most powerful response was to notice, but not give in immediately. Truly attractive men do not compete for attention. He observes who tries to enter his orbit. Casanova was not a hunter. He was the prize that he knew could only be found by the right eyes. There is a phenomenon called the halo effect, where your presence projects extra qualities. When you master this effect, people assume that you are more intelligent, interesting, and successful. Groups stop to listen to you. People seek your opinion. Casanova used this not to impress, but to filter. This does not mean being arrogant. Strength lies in the balance between magnetism and discernment. Casanova dominated spaces with context, not volume. He knew when to speak, when to be the enigma amid the noise. When you notice women orbiting your space, creating coincidences to be close to you, understand, this is the game. Men who ignore it lose. Those who notice it turn the dynamic into a field of choice. Casanova said, "Seduction is not about conquering, it's about becoming the most interesting territory to be conquered." There is a silent mistake that destroys the self-perception of many men. They believe that they are only attractive when they receive explicit validation. But Casanova knew that the real impact happens before words, in invisible movements. He understood that seduction does not begin with compliments. It begins with the way people react to your mere presence. When you walk into a room and notice conversations pausing, glances locating you unnecessarily, people adjusting their posture around you, this is not chance. It is influence. And the more natural your awareness of this impact, the more magnetic you become. Casanova did not seek this effect. He accepted it as a reflection of his self-knowledge. Another little noticed phenomenon is how other men react to your silent value. Some align themselves with you, seeking your approval. Others try to compete, becoming more animated, vying for attention in conversations, trying to outdo you with stories and opinions. Casanova knew that these micro-disputes are not threats, but confirmations. You are only the target of competition when you are already seen as a reference point. What about women? They react with a subtle balance between curiosity and territoriality. They won't openly compete for you, but they will start to monopolize conversations, seeking your attention with small gestures. A touch on the arm, a comment that demands a response, a smile that hides a challenge. Casanova called this silent jealousy. It's a game where women try to secure space before you even declare any interest. Another detail that few men notice: people start to assume that you are more sought after than you really are. Comments like, "You must have a lot of people after you," or "Someone like you doesn't stay single," don't come out of nowhere. It's a reflection of the way you occupy your space. Casanova knew that when you are seen as someone who has options, you become even more desirable. This projection of status does not depend on wealth or fame. It comes from your posture, your comfortable silence, your ability not to seek validation every second. Insecure men try to justify themselves. They explain too much. Men with presence just are. Casanova did not explain his worth. He made others feel it. Another overlooked pattern is the impact you have even in brief absences. Have you noticed how in certain groups when you walk away the conversation changes? How your return alters the dynamic again? This happens because your presence redefines the environment, adjusts rhythms, creates expectations. Casanova used this as a subtle weapon, not by forced absence but by returning in a way that created energy breaks. The difference between ordinary men and magnetic men lies in reading these micro-reactions. While some need to hear "you're amazing" to believe it, others perceive it in the silence of glances, in repeated gestures, in the way people reorganize the space around them. Casanova said that true confirmation never comes through words, but through the way the world adapts to your energy. And here's the crucial point. Most men spend their lives ignoring these signs. They are so concerned with proving something, with fitting into unattainable standards that they don't realize the influence they already have. Casanova was not the strongest or the most handsome. He was the most aware. When you start observing how people react around you, the glances they give you, the pauses in conversation, the need for validation disguised in others, you stop wondering if you're attractive. You begin to accept that the game is already underway. The question isn't about being accepted. It's about recognizing that perhaps you're already in control. You've spent your life waiting for clear signs, waiting for someone to say, "You're good enough." But Casanova never waited. He knew that the world never gives explicit confirmation to those who still doubt themselves. The game of seduction, respect, and influence is not given. It is perceived. And now, perhaps for the first time, you've begun to realize it. When you understand that quickly averted glances are not disinterest, but fear of exposure. When you realize that casual approaches are disguised invitations. When you feel that conversations pause when you speak. This is not chance. It is a reflection of your energy. Casanova said that the truly attractive man is the one who masters the inner space before trying to master the outer space. And that is exactly what you are beginning to do. You are letting go of seeking validation and starting to interpret the signals that the world has always sent you. The impact you have doesn't need to be shouted. It needs to be read. And the more you read, the more you position yourself as the filter, not the needy one. You don't need to beg for attention. You need to decide who deserves yours. And here's the brutal truth. Most people will never reach this level. Most will continue to seek obvious approval, ignoring the details that scream in silence. But you, by getting this far, have demonstrated something rare, a willingness to see yourself without the veil of doubt. If this content resonated with you, I want to extend an invitation to you. Not a passive invitation, an invitation to commit. Hit the like button now, but not just as a mechanical gesture. Make it a statement that you are no longer a spectator in your own life. Subscribe to the channel because here we don't deliver empty formulas. We challenge perceptions. And if this video impacted you, consider supporting this project with any amount. Your support is the fuel that keeps this conversation alive, unfiltered, unmasked. But I want something more from you. In the comments, write internal mastery, not as a pretty phrase, but as a statement. Because that's exactly what separates men who remain trapped in doubt from those who begin to lead their own narratives. Internal mastery is not about controlling others. It's about being unshakable in the face of social dynamics. It's about seeing what others don't see, reacting when others hesitate, and building a presence that needs no explanation. Every time you notice a glance that returns, a gesture that follows you, a posture that adjusts to yours, you will be one step closer to understanding that power was never outside of you. It has always been in the way you read the environment, and especially in the way you decide to act on it. Write internal mastery in the comments. I want to know who really understands. Because from now on, the difference between being a spectator and being the center of gravity in your relationship starts right now. And if you're ready to consciously embark on this journey, show it with a simple gesture, like, subscribe, and support. Because this channel isn't just about content, it's about building yours from the inside out.